Ashley. I'm the campus pastor of St. Joe the Y. Thank you for joining me for a digital circle of Circle Church. Throughout this time, I'll be asking you some questions and encourage you to pause the video and reflect as I do so. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please put them in the comments. I would love to hear them. Today launches a series of faithful, fearless, and fruitful. These are the values that we've defined as a church and that we are both living into now and will continue to grow into. Today we're talking about the faithful value. The value is faithfully seeking with one another the call of Jesus Christ through his teachings in Scripture. So I wonder, who has shown you what faithfulness is in life? Maybe it's a spouse, a parent, coworker, fellow church member. How would you define faithfulness? If we define faithfulness as actions rooted in the remembrance of love and commitment, would it call anyone to mind? Who reminds you of this definition? Our scripture this morning comes from 2 Samuel chapter 9. And in case you're wondering, we're actually following the same scripture that our kids are studying when they break out of service with Mrs. Taya. This was an intentional choice, so that if you have kids at home, or as you see them around the church, perhaps you can ask them, what did you think about today's story? Okay, let's read. 2 Samuel chapter 9. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor, said, "Mephibosheth, at your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" The king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table, like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. Now, why would David demonstrate faithfulness to Mephibosheth? It's because of his love, commitment, and remembrance of Jonathan. Jonathan loved David, and even as the previous King Saul and David fell apart, Jonathan continued to faithfully care for David. Even though his care for David probably put him at risk from violence from his own father, and eventually from David's soldiers. Was there any risk to David's faithfulness to Mephibosheth? Maybe. It's possible that David brings Mephibosheth his table to bless him, but also keep an eye on him at the same time. David Bergman suggests that Mephibosheth's disability would have probably removed him from serious consideration for the role of king. And to be king in that time required one to engage in strenuous physical activity, and disabilities were highly stigmatized. Do you think David's faithfulness to Jonathan and therefore Mephibosheth's rewarded? 2 Samuel 16, 1-4 says, "When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, and 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on. The bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness." The king then asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Ziba said to him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks, 'Today the Israelites will restore me to my grandfather's kingdom.'" Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I humbly bow," Ziba said. "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." By this time in the story, the kingdom is in rebellion against David. The rebellion is led by his own son, and the king and his household flee Jerusalem and are on the run. Ziba seems faithful here, but one wonders why Mephibosheth didn't act more robustly in David's defense. Eventually, Mephibosheth will explain himself in 2 Samuel 19:24-30. Mephibosheth argues he couldn't run because of his legs, so he stayed to be an advocate and spy. Really? But Mephibosheth is convincing in part because he hadn't shaved or showered in the time that David was away, pointing to his grief and prayer. The truth is, it's impossible to know who is telling the truth. David seems to decide that he's not sure if Mephibosheth can be trusted. He leaves him with half of his property and lets him live. We're left knowing only that David will continue to let Mephibosheth live. How do you think David figured out what faithfulness looked like in this complicated situation? One of our value statements is faithfully seeking with one another the call of Jesus Christ through his teachings in Scripture. And it suggests that we look to Jesus together. It's aspiration when our council has approved and after much listening and discussion as a whole as a church. So how do we figure out what it means to be faithful in complicated situations in our families, in our societies, or even as a church? So maybe our model of what faithfulness is in tricky situations isn't like David. Maybe we have a model that is clearer and at the same time far more challenging: Jesus. Does it ever feel like a novel idea to keep Jesus as the central focus of who we are as a church? Probably not, but it's hard. In what ways can we focus on that value so that we can grow in our faithfulness to God, one another, and the Fort? I'm so glad that you've joined us for a digital circle of Circle Church. Stick around for the next couple of minutes to watch the key 3 announcements.
Good morning and welcome to worship. I'm Glenn and I'm one of the pastors here.
My name's Austin. I'm the worship leader at St. Joe at the Y.
What's going on? My name's Chris. I'm the associate pastor at the Canvas.
Welcome to worship. A few things we want to talk about today. First being, why are we even here? Well, the answer is that though most of us think of St. Joe and St. Joe at the Y as 2 campuses, we're actually probably a lot more campuses than just 2. We've got a lot of staff, like Chris, like Austin, and like Beth Wind, who spend their days here at Sweetwater. So not infrequently, we have staff meetings here at Sweetwater. Also, we've got folks that spend time and lead worship, like Laura Deckard at Heritage Point, and we've got whatever location you're involved in ministry, that's a campus of our multi-campus congregation too. I bet you haven't thought about it like that, but we're sure thinking about it today as we're here meeting in this space. As we gather for worship this morning, let's focus though on the key 3 announcements today.
Okay.
Chris?
Well, you may have asked yourselves, what are these cards for? I mean, these cards are beautiful. These cards are colorful.
Yeah, don't oversell it, Chris. Let's just...
They talk about actually inviting people. We want to be faithful and fearless for the Fort this fall. So what we want to do is have everyone take these cards and distribute it to your friends, your family, folks who you may think want to attend. Now I know it's a little bit scary, but we think you can do it. In fact, we know you can do it. We have plenty of these printed out. By all means, this fall, be faithful and fearless this fall.
Right on the back of those cards is information about Level Up, which actually started last week. We're celebrating that and praying for it, but this next Wednesday night, Level Up continues for children all the way into high school. We hope you'll make sure people know about that invitation. And also, we want you to be aware of 2 more things. One, there are still treasures out in the church gym that you can claim if you'd like them, things we collected from around the building.
Yeah.
Take a look at them, leave a donation if you'd like. This will be the last week they'll be available for you to pick through them. And finally, the big event here in early September are the Waves of Change led by our Women in Faith. That event will be next Saturday from 9:30 to 11:30. You can register online or at the Mission Center at the back of your worship space, stjoemin.com/events. And if you would like childcare for that, please make sure you indicate that either at the Mission Center or in your online registration. So this, and finally we end with this. Are you thinking yet? What's your campus? What's your place of ministry? What's your sphere of influence? I hope so, because once you figure it out, we've got a way to give people invitation to all that we're doing with St. Joe and St. Joe at the Y. Welcome to worship.